Warm welcome to esteemed faculty, staff, students, fellow board members, families, friends. It's an honor to be here today and a thrill to be back at Tuck. This is an institution that really helped shape who I am today. I'm looking forward to sharing a few words with you about my life and my career, but I should warn you that my choice of subject may make a few of you uncomfortable. That's because I don't think enough of us talk about failure. And failure is what I'd actually like to talk about today. Let me first start with a question. How do you know when you've made a mistake? What does a mistake feel like? Let me answer that by taking you back to 1985. I was 22 years old, just finished at USC with a degree in physics, and I would like to say that that last sentence was somewhat of a miracle. I think I was in third grade when my teacher, Sister Ann, sat my mother down and said, "You know, Mrs. Lynch, not every young boy is meant to go to college." My high school teachers probably had a similar view, and I wasn't what you'd call a focused student. I had other things on my mind. Music, for one. I played lead guitar in a band and was obsessed with it, still do today. But back then, playing with my band at clubs and parties meant a little more to me than my schoolwork. But miracle or not, I did find my way to college, and once I got there, I became enamored with my first physics class. Maybe because it was hard, and I thought it would be cool to take the hardest major I could find. But physics, I really loved the purity of it, the way proofs could be derived, step by step, through logic, like philosophy. Solving problems, the harder the better, truly excited me. I still like problem solving, in fact, but we'll come back to that. So there I am, 22 years old, with my new degree, and I'm working, because this was the 80s in Southern California, in the defense industry for Hughes Aircraft Company. It was a great job, a great salary, seriously interesting R&D work. I was helping design countermeasures for infrared missile guidance systems. But my office life left something to be desired. The Hughes labs were on the west side of Los Angeles near LAX, and the lab I worked in was underground because of security concerns. The government was worried about Russians bouncing laser beams off of our windows, which they could use to actually hear what we were saying inside. So every day I would go into the building, go downstairs, go through one locked door with a keypad into what we called back then a man trap, through another door with an old-fashioned combination lock, and then into my lab. A windowless room by myself for the whole day. And that is what a mistake feels like. Stuck 20 feet underground and alone, thinking, how did this happen? Knowing you're on the wrong path. It's not a good feeling, and it surprised me, because I'd been working part-time for Hughes all through college. But now that I'd graduated, I realized that as much as I loved studying physics, what I really liked were people, human interaction. I needed to be social, and so I had to make a change. You might say, no big deal. You're pretty light on your feet in your 20s, right? But big changes are always difficult. Course correction can be hard. Oh, and did I mention I was married? So let me speak up for that terribly old-fashioned idea of marrying young. Kathleen and I were both seniors at USC when we met, and at 21 years old, I don't think either of us had any thoughts of marriage. But we met, and I just knew, and 3 months later we were engaged, and now we've been married for 33 years. But soon after we were married, Kathleen became pregnant. Not an ideal time to quit your job, but it just so happened that Kathleen had a job that she wanted to leave. She was working for her father, running one of his manufacturing plants. So while Kathleen took on the lion's share of raising our new baby and managing our household, I tried my best to fill her shoes at that plant. And it was a great experience for a while. Manufacturing was tough, but I learned a ton. The company made bathtubs, which is more interesting than it sounds, and my father-in-law was a wonderful man. But there came a time a few years in when that feeling came back, that wrong path feeling. The awareness that this was not what I was meant to be doing. I didn't want to make bathtubs. So this wasn't going to work out for me. So Thank goodness for business school. But that course correction wouldn't be easy either. Kathleen now and I had 2 kids at this point. So I'd be giving up my salary, moving the family from California to beautiful Hanover, and taking out loans to pay for it. And Kathleen was on board with this, but telling her father was tough. He didn't want me to go. He had a vision of a family business handed down through generations. So that was a difficult conversation, but it was a poignant one because leaving didn't feel like a choice to me. It felt like a necessity. Which brings me to Tuck in the mid-90s. I absolutely loved it here. Being able to live here for 2 years with a young family was a dream. I still think back on those years as 2 of the best of my life. I made incredible friendships and connections. I also learned so much. Learned about discounted cash flows and the efficient frontier hypothesis. Actually, I really can't remember everything I learned, but standing here today, I do think about some of the things I didn't learn. I didn't learn how to become an investment banker, which is what I would end up doing next, and which I'd have to figure out in real time. Sure, I learned all the tools necessary to be one, but I didn't really know how to become one. Nor did I learn what it would be like to run a company, which I would end up doing a few short years later, and would be another trial by fire. For some things, you just need to experience that trial by fire to learn. But the biggest thing I didn't learn was how valuable the lessons of my 20s had been. That windowless lab, that feeling that you're on the wrong path, and my course corrections. It was right there in front of me, but I didn't see yet that success is not a straight line, and that mistakes are part of life. And thank goodness, because they teach you much more than any success ever will. They teach you about yourself. I didn't know that yet, which is really another way of saying I didn't know myself yet. I didn't understand the power of authenticity, which is knowing who you are and staying true to that, even and especially when you fail. As I said in the beginning, people don't talk enough about failure. Sure, it's a fashionable idea in Silicon Valley, that's true. But in other industries and other countries, it's still a taboo subject, a mark that can be on you forever. Take investment banking, that alpha culture that I was in for 4 years after Tuck. There's not a lot of failure talk there. Bankers are self-starters. They work incredibly hard. They're focused on the deal. They're driven. And sometimes they're terrible managers. Senior bankers treat junior bankers ruthlessly because they were treated ruthlessly. And it's a brutal world, but I jumped in with both feet and found myself leading tech deals for Morgan Stanley a year after graduation, and then moving my family to Silicon Valley and then to London, working intense hours. It was a crazy time, but before long, I was changing paths again. These were the early days of the internet and broadband, and there was this company in Europe that I had taken public, and they wanted me to start a broadband company for 1/6 of the money that Morgan Stanley was offering me to stay. But I didn't think twice. Investment banking had been a great experience, but it wasn't the right long-term path, because here was this new challenge, this opportunity to step again outside of my comfort zone. And I saw the potential in broadband, and that was the right path, as was the next company I built in Europe, and then moving back to the States and building Sling TV, Pandora 2. Great experiences all. But I made mistakes at each and every one of these companies. Some small ones, some not so small ones. Decisions that cost us money, strategic errors that slowed us down, and mistakes that even rattled my confidence. But when I look back today, all I see are the things that I learned about how critical it is when you're running a cool new company that's part of a bigger company to keep it somewhat integrated into the wider parent culture, to bring people along, not build walls and protect your turf, something I didn't do very well early on. I also learned you shouldn't fall in love with the next new thing if customers are still really wanting to buy the last new thing. Customers tell you where you need to be if you listen, not the other way around. I learned personal things along this journey too, like that of all the titles I've held in my life, the ones that matter most to me are husband, father, son, brother, and friend. Now let me come back to problem solving. I do still love it, and I find myself with a pretty interesting problem today as the first global CEO of Condé Nast. I've never worked in publishing, I've never been a journalist. I'm a tech, digital media startup guy, and here I am running this 110-year-old media company with 6,000 employees and businesses in 30 countries. That's a new challenge for me, and it's an exciting one. But there are headwinds on our traditional print advertising business, along with our rapidly growing digital and video businesses. And there's this international business that for its entire life has been an entirely separate company, and which now needs to be merged and integrated with our US business. At the same time, Condé Nast has incredible brands, like Matt mentioned. Brands like The New Yorker and Vanity Fair and Vogue and Wired. These are titles that I've admired my whole life. But the company's at an inflection point, and the whole media business is changing fast. I want to keep pace, I want to get out ahead and go where the customer is. There's a lot to do, and it's a bit daunting. But the size of the challenge is exactly what drew me to it. I'm a little over a month into the new role, and I can't say we have a fully baked plan to solve the problems, but I know we will. I'm confident we'll figure it out and probably make some mistakes along the way too. Okay, commencement speeches like these should have some practical advice. So here's a trick I've learned about problem solving. When you're in the mess of something, when there's a really tough problem to solve, and you just feel overwhelmed by it, I sometimes tell myself, you know what? This is probably going to get much worse. I tell myself, this is nothing. 3 months from now, it'll probably be way worse. And you know what? I'll figure out how to make my way through that too. It sounds counterintuitive, but it actually makes your problem feel smaller. Something else I do, and I've told my kids since they were young, is when you feel overwhelmed by what's in front of you, don't think about what you have to accomplish next week, or in 3 months, or in a year. Think about what you have to do right now, this hour, this minute. Shorten your time horizon and set really short-term goals. And that'll get you moving, and pretty soon you'll find yourself looking out at those longer time horizons again. Final word of advice is less practical, maybe even more philosophical. Change course when you need to. Take risks, actively risk failure, because you will make mistakes. There's no getting around that. If you push yourself enough, you're going to go down the wrong path, and at some point you will fail. But know that failure only teaches you who you are, what your strengths and your weaknesses are, and how to do better next time. Know that people who have known only success, as talented as they may be, really haven't pushed themselves enough. They've never jumped into the abyss, and the abyss is where you want to be. Experiencing failure and the lessons it teaches you is what leads you to the greater success that's on the other side of that abyss. So, let me congratulate you all on what you've achieved here and wish each and every one of you from the bottom of my heart every success in the world. Oh, and maybe along the way, a few fascinating failures. Thank you very much.